What if someone more powerful than you wanted you, and there was nothing in the world you could do to stop it? You know the shape of this. You've felt something like it before, in a different form, a different life, but the same essential weight. The moment when something larger than you turns its attention your way, when a cloud descends over the field, when the eyes of the powerful begin to watch, when the thing you cannot resist begins to move toward you. And the question isn't what you'll do to fight back. The question is what it will cost you. Tonight, while you sleep, we are going to answer it. Now, let's go back to ancient Greece, back to a meadow in the Argolid, where a young woman had wandered at the instruction of divine dreams, where Zeus was waiting, and where one of the most enduring stories in all of mythology was about to begin. Zeus saw Io. She was a priestess of Hera. This detail is not incidental. Of all the women that Zeus could have chosen to pursue, he chose one who served his wife's own temple, a young woman dedicated to the goddess of marriage, employed in the worship of the divine being who governed the sacred bond, the person whose entire daily existence was organized around honoring the Queen of Gods. Whether this was a coincidence that the mythology found too ironic to resist, or whether Zeus was drawn specifically to what was forbidden, or whether Io's connection to Hera's worship was simply a feature of the landscape that the story happened in without carrying particular significance, the ancient sources leave ambiguous. What is not ambiguous is the consequence. When Zeus pursued a priestess of Hera, the Queen of Gods was going to find out. And finding out was going to produce a response proportional to the offense. Io was the daughter of the river god Inachus, the son of Oceanus and Tethys, the divine being of the river Inachus in the Argolid region of the Peloponnese. She was mortal in the sense that mattered for the mythology, connected to the divine through her father's lineage, but not herself possessed of the immortality and the divine nature that being Olympian conferred. She was beautiful. She was young. She was, by the accident of her position as Hera's priestess, in the specific location where Zeus's attention found her. He came to her in dreams first. This is how the ancient sources describe the beginning. Dreams of a divine presence, of a voice telling her to come to a certain meadow, to make herself available. The specific way that the divine world communicated with mortals who were being pursued was through the threshold of sleep, through the medium of Hypnos's domain, where the boundary between the waking and the divine was most permeable. Io told her father about the dreams. Inachus, the river god, consulted oracles. He sent to the oracle at Delphi and the oracle at Dodona to ask what these dreams meant and what should be done. The oracles told him that the dreams were divine and that if he did not expel Io from his house and his family, the divine wrath that would follow would be catastrophic. Inachus expelled his daughter. He obeyed the oracles. He sent Io away from the home and the family and the protection that her father could provide. And Io, cast out, wandered to the meadow that the dreams had indicated, where Zeus was waiting. Zeus came to Io, and then he did something that the mythology consistently presents as the first instinct of the king of gods. When he was doing something he did not want his wife to notice. He covered the landscape with cloud. He drew a dense darkness over the region. A specific, targeted darkness, not a natural weather phenomenon, but a divine concealment. A cloud thick enough to prevent observation from above, from the sky. To prevent the specific kind of observation that Hera, the queen of the divine world, could conduct from her position in the divine halls of Olympus. The cloud was the admission. In the act of concealing what he was doing, Zeus acknowledged that what he was doing was wrong, that it violated something. that it was the kind of action that would produce consequences if observed. The cloud was not the behavior of someone who believed what they were doing was acceptable. It was the behavior of someone who knew it was not and who was trying to prevent the knowledge from reaching the being whose judgment mattered. Hera noticed the cloud. She was the queen of gods. She was the goddess of marriage, which meant she had a specific awareness of the behaviors that violated marriage and a specific sensitivity to the signs of those behaviors. An unnatural cloud covering a specific region while the rest of the sky was clear was not something she was going to overlook. She came down from Olympus to see what was happening in the region covered by that cloud. Zeus saw her coming. He acted. He transformed Io into a cow. A white cow, beautiful by bovine standards, with the specific quality that divine transformations always had of being more perfect than the ordinary version of the thing they produced. A white cow standing in the meadow where the cloud had been, looking at Hera with the large dark eyes of a cow, showing no visible sign of having just been a human woman. Hera looked at the cow. She was not fooled. Or rather, she knew exactly what had happened, and she knew exactly who the cow was, and she understood exactly what the cloud had been concealing. But she could not prove it. The transformation had been performed before she arrived. The evidence was gone. There was only a beautiful white cow standing in a meadow and a husband who was the picture of innocence. She asked for the cow as a gift. Now, close your eyes. Take a breath. A white cow stands in a sun-warmed meadow in the ancient Argolid, the grass long and still around her hooves. Above her, the sky is brilliant and open, the cloud gone now, as if nothing had ever happened here. And yet everything has happened here. She turns her head slowly, and her eyes, dark and wide and ancient, hold something that a cow's eyes should not hold. The most powerful being in the universe did this to her, and the most powerful goddess in the universe now owns her, and she has no name left that anyone will say out loud. Zeus could not refuse without confirming what Hera already knew. Refusing to give her the cow would have been an admission that the cow was something other than a cow, that there was a reason to be protective of it, that the cow mattered in a way that an ordinary cow would not have mattered. He had to give it to her or reveal himself. He gave her the cow. Hera took possession of Io, and she gave the cow to Argus Panoptes to guard. Argus Panoptes, the hundred-eyed giant. His name meant the all-seeing, and his eyes were distributed across his body so comprehensively that he was never fully asleep. When some of his eyes closed, others remained open. He watched in every direction simultaneously. He was the perfect guard for a prisoner that Hera did not want to escape, that Hera did not want anyone to access, that Hera wanted to ensure remained a cow in a field under constant surveillance forever. Io stood in the field under the watchful eyes of Argus. 100 eyes, always some of them open. She could not escape. She could not be reached. The divine punishment for the transgression that Hera could not officially acknowledge but was entirely certain of had been designed with the specific thoroughness of someone who understood the situation completely and was addressing it indirectly but comprehensively. Zeus felt guilt, or responsibility, or the specific quality of feeling that came from having created a situation that was now causing suffering to someone who had not chosen to be in it. He sent Hermes. He told Hermes to go to the field where Argus watched Io and to free her, by any means necessary, to get past the 100 eyes of the all-seeing giant and to release the cow from her confinement. Hermes went in disguise, as a shepherd carrying his pipes. He sat down near Argus, and he began to play music and to tell stories. He was the god of communication and of the specific art of making others receptive to what you wanted them to receive. He played his pipes and he talked, and he gradually, deliberately, patiently worked through every one of Argus's 100 eyes, coaxing them closed one by one with music and with the hypnotic quality of story. This took a long time. 100 eyes do not close easily, especially when they have been placed there specifically to remain open. But Hermes was patient, and his music was the music of the god who had invented the lyre, and eventually the last of the 100 eyes closed. And Hermes cut off Argus's head. Hera found out. Of course she found out. She took the 100 eyes of her faithful watchmen and placed them in the tail of the peacock, which became her sacred bird. The eyes of Argus, the eyes that had watched so faithfully and had still been closed by divine music, became the pattern on the peacock's tail. Every peacock that has ever displayed its tail since then has carried the memorial of the 100-eyed giant who watched Io and was still outmaneuvered. Io was free from the field, but she was still a cow. And Hera sent a gadfly, a divine gadfly, a creature whose specific function was to torment Io without ceasing, to sting her and drive her, to give her no rest, to prevent her from settling anywhere for long, from finding any comfortable resting place, from achieving the stability that would have allowed her to wait out the situation. Io ran. She ran from the gadfly across the Greek world and then beyond it, through the regions that are now the Balkans, across the sea that was named after her, the Ionian Sea, into Asia, across the continent that was eventually named Europe for another of Zeus's loves, into Egypt. The geography of the ancient world was marked by her passage. The Bosphorus, the strait between Europe and Asia, meant the ford of the cow, the place where Io the cow crossed the water. The Ionian Sea carried her name. The places she passed through and the names they bore were the mythological record of her driven wandering, the trace left in the landscape by the specific suffering that Zeus's pursuit and Hera's vengeance had together produced. She ran until she reached Egypt, and in Egypt, on the banks of the Nile, she was finally restored. Zeus touched her and she became human again, a human woman on the banks of the Nile with the long wandering behind her and the strange story of what had happened to her becoming one of the most told stories in the Mediterranean world. In Egypt, she gave birth to Epiphus, the son of Zeus, and Epiphus became an ancestor of the great Egyptian lineage that would eventually produce Europa, who would be another of Zeus's loves, and Danaës, and the Danaïds, and the chain of consequences that connected the story of Io to the story of Perseus and beyond. The story of Io is uncomfortable. It has always been uncomfortable, and the ancient Greeks knew it was uncomfortable, and the discomfort is part of what makes it significant. It is a story about power and about the people who have no power in relation to those who have all of it. Io did not seek Zeus's attention. She did not want to be transformed into a cow. She did not choose to be driven across the world by a gadfly. She was a young woman who was in the wrong place at the wrong time relative to the desires of a god who wanted her and the jealousy of a goddess who could not directly confront the god, and so directed her anger at the human being who could not protect herself. Both Zeus and Hera wronged Io. Zeus pursued her without any consideration of what his pursuit would mean for her. Hera punished her for something Io had not chosen. The human being at the center of this story was the victim of both the pursuing desire of a god and the wounded pride of a goddess, and she had no recourse against either. The mythology does not present this as acceptable. It does not ask us to celebrate what Zeus did or to sympathize with Hera's method of response. It presents it plainly, with the specific quality of observation that the best ancient literature brings to uncomfortable truths. This happened. This is how power operated in the world of the gods, and by extension, in the world of mortals. The powerful did what they wanted, and the less powerful endured the consequences. That this is remembered, that Io's story has been told for 3,000 years, is itself a kind of justice. Not sufficient justice, not a redress of what she suffered, but a refusal to let it be forgotten. A preservation of the record, a testament to the fact that what happened to her happened, and that it mattered. The peacock carries the eyes of Argus in its tail, and every time you see a peacock's tail, the mythology reminds you of the 100 eyes that watched Io in the field and of the story that those eyes belonged to. She was real. What happened to her was real, and it is remembered. Europa was a princess of Phoenicia, the daughter of King Agenor, who was himself descended from Io through the Egyptian lineage that Io's arrival on the Nile had established. The ancestry is significant. Europa was the great-granddaughter, in some accounts, of the woman whom Zeus had transformed into a cow and driven across the world with a gadfly. The story of Zeus's desires circled back through generations to produce another encounter between the king of gods and a woman of the same lineage. She was beautiful. The mythology describes her with the specific vocabulary that it reserved for those who attracted divine attention. Not simply attractive by human standards, but possessed of a quality of beauty that exceeded what the human world usually contained. The kind of beauty that made gods take notice from the distance of the sky. She was in the fields near the sea with her companions, young women together, doing what young women did in the Mediterranean spring, gathering flowers. The meadow was full of them, hyacinths and crocuses, and the specific abundance of a Phoenician spring in a landscape that was, in the ancient world, one of the most fertile regions of the eastern Mediterranean. Zeus saw her from above, and felt what he always felt when he saw someone like Europa, the specific divine desire that the mythology consistently attributed to him, that brought so much consequence into the world, that drove so many stories. He went to Aphrodite, or Eros struck him. The mythology uses different mechanisms for different loves, the divine community of desire operating through different channels to produce the same result. Zeus wanted Europa, and he was going to pursue her. But this time he would be careful. He transformed himself into a bull. Not just any bull, a bull of extraordinary beauty, white as snow, with horns that curved like the new moon, with breath that was scented like flowers, with eyes that were gentle and dark and filled with a specific docility that was entirely unlike what a bull usually expressed. A bull that seemed safe, that seemed, in every visible quality, like something you could approach and touch and not be afraid of. He walked into the meadow where Europa and her companions were gathering flowers. The bull's appearance attracted the girls immediately. It was too beautiful to be an ordinary animal. It stood in the meadow with the specific quality of something that had been designed to attract rather than to threaten, and it succeeded completely. The girls approached it. They fed it flowers. They touched its flanks and found the hide smooth and warm and inviting. Some of them sat on it. Europa was the most daring. She climbed onto the bull's back. The bull began to walk toward the sea, slowly at first, not alarming, just moving in the direction of the water with the particular unhurriedness of an animal that was simply going where it was inclined to go. The girls who had been with Europa did not immediately understand what was happening. The pace was gentle. The direction was just toward the sea, and then the bull was in the water, and then the bull was swimming. And Europa, on its back, was being carried away from the shore, away from Phoenicia, away from her companions who stood on the beach shouting after her, away from everything she knew. Across the sea, she held the bull's horns. She looked back at the receding shore and she understood, with the specific understanding that comes when the situation has already become irreversible, that something extraordinary and terrifying was happening to her. That the beautiful white bull was not an ordinary animal. That the gentleness and the docility and the flower-scented breath had been a performance, a design, a trap that she had walked into with her eyes open because the trap had been made to look like something safe. The sea that Zeus crossed with Europa on his back was named for her. The body of water that separates the eastern Mediterranean from the Greek world, the sea that the ancient navigators crossed to reach the Levantine coast and Egypt, the sea that the Phoenicians had sailed for centuries. The name Europa passed from the woman to the sea and eventually from the sea to the continent that lay beyond it to the west. Europe is named for a Phoenician princess who was carried away on the back of a bull. The crossing was not brief. It was a sea voyage, however divinely enabled, across the open water from the Phoenician coast to the island of Crete. The mythology does not dwell on the duration of the crossing or on what Europa experienced during it. It focuses on the beginning, the moment of the bull walking into the water with her on his back, and on the arrival, the moment when the journey ended and what had happened became fully clear. She arrived on Crete, the island that had sheltered the infant Zeus while he grew up hidden from his father. The oldest inhabited landscape in the Greek world. The island where the Minoans had built their great civilization before the Greeks arrived. Where the mountains were ancient and the caves were deep and the sense of something prior and powerful was present in the stone. Zeus revealed himself. The bull was gone. The transformation was undone. He was Zeus, the king of gods, the being who had carried her across the sea, who had chosen her from the world of mortals and brought her to the island that was in some ways the most significant place in his own divine history. He told her who he was and why he had come to her and what he intended. Europa bore Zeus 3 sons on Crete. The mythology is consistent about this. 3 sons from the love of a Phoenician princess and the king of gods on the island where the king of gods had been born. The first was Minos. Minos would become the king of Crete, the most famous king that island ever had, the ruler whose name attached itself to the entire Minoan civilization in the naming that modern archaeology has used. He would build the palace of Gnosis, or inhabit it, or preside over its glory. He would commission the labyrinth from Daedalus to contain the Minotaur. He would become one of the 3 judges of the dead in the underworld after his death, his justice so reliable and so thorough that Zeus appointed him to the post. He was Zeus's son, and the mythology showed this in the specific quality that Minos had. Not simply power or wealth or the ordinary qualities of a successful king. The capacity for justice that his father's lineage gave him. The ability to see situations clearly and to adjudicate them fairly, to maintain the order that the divine world had established and that good governance was supposed to reflect. The second son was Rhadamanthus. Like his brother Minos, he would become a judge of the dead after his death, one of the 3 who weighed the souls of mortals and directed them to their appropriate place in the afterlife. His justice was so reliable that the expression Rhadamanthan justice, meaning strict and unyielding, passed into later languages as a way of describing a certain quality of legal rigor. The third was Sarpedon, who would become a king in Lycia, in Asia Minor, and who would fight in the Trojan War on the side of Troy. and who would be one of the most tragic figures of the Iliad, the divine-born hero who died at the hands of Patroclus while Zeus, his father, watched from the sky and wept. These three sons, a judge king, a judge, and a warrior king. Three different expressions of what divine parentage produced when it combined with the specific qualities of a mortal mother. Three different ways of being the child of Zeus. Back in Phoenicia, Europa's father Agenor did not simply accept his daughter's disappearance. He sent his sons to find her. He told them not to come back without their sister or without news of what had happened to her. This command, well-intentioned and utterly impossible to fulfill, sent Europa's brothers across the ancient world on a search that was doomed from the beginning. Zeus had taken Europa to Crete. The gods did not give back what they had taken. The brothers would not find her. They dispersed. Cadmus went west, eventually founding the city of Thebes in Greece, which became one of the most important cities in the mythology, the city of Oedipus and the seven against Thebes, and all the great Theban stories. Phoenix went south, giving his name to the region of Phoenicia from which they had all come. Cilix went to Asia Minor. Each of them, in the process of not finding Europa, established something, founded something, gave their name to something. The unsuccessful search for the lost daughter and sister became the origin story of multiple civilizations, multiple cities, multiple regional names that the ancient world knew. This is characteristic of Greek mythology at its best. The lost generates the movement. The movement generates the founding. The founding generates the history. Europa was not found and could not be found, but the search for her created the world that would eventually produce the people who told her story. Europa was not simply a woman who was abducted by a god. She was the origin point of a lineage and a name that covered the Western world. The continent of Europe, in the ancient geographic understanding, was the land to the west of the sea that bore her name. The name traveled from the woman to the sea to the geography, from the specific to the general, from the personal story to the broadest possible frame. She was also, like Io before her, a mortal woman who had been acted on by divine desire without her consent and without meaningful recourse. The white bull in the meadow was not an offer that could be refused. The creature that approached was designed to be approached, designed to be touched, designed to invite exactly the trust that it then exploited. The beauty and the gentleness were the mechanism of the taking. The mythology does not ask us to find this acceptable. It presents it as what it was, with the specific honesty that the best ancient literature brought to the operations of power in the world. But it also preserved her. Europa's name is on the map. Her descendants were judges of the dead and kings and the founders of cities. The continent of the Western world carries her memory. She was taken, and she did not disappear into obscurity. Her story, her name, her lineage, these persisted. These were remembered. In a mythology that was largely written by and for the powerful, the fact that the women who were acted on by that power are remembered by name, that their stories are told with the specific detail that makes them real rather than simply background, is itself something. Not sufficient, not justice, but something. Europa was a Phoenician princess who was carried across the sea on the back of a god in the shape of a bull, and the Western world is named after her. And the bull's constellation, Taurus, is in the sky every spring. The shape of the horns like a new moon, just as the mythology described them. Still there, still carrying her across the sky. Callisto was a huntress. She was one of the companions of Artemis, the goddess of the hunt and the wild places. One of the group of young women who had dedicated themselves to the goddess, who traveled with her through the forests and the mountains, who hunted alongside her, who had taken the same vow of chastity that the goddess herself had taken. The vow was not simply a personal choice. It was the condition of belonging to Artemis's company. To be a companion of the goddess of the hunt was to commit to the life she lived, which was the life of the forest, the life of the chase, the life that had no room in it for the domestic arrangements that marriage and family required. Callisto had made this commitment. She was a hunter, a follower of Artemis, a young woman whose life was organized around the wild places that the goddess governed. Her name was connected to the word for beautiful, and she was beautiful in the specific way that hunters are beautiful, with the strength and the grace and the presence of someone who spent their time in physical engagement with the natural world. Zeus saw her. The story of Zeus and Callisto is one of the most disturbing in the mythology because of the specific mechanism of the deception that was used. Zeus did not simply come to her as himself, as a god whose desire was unmistakable. He came to her in disguise, as Artemis. He took the form of the goddess that Callisto had dedicated her life to serving, the divine being she trusted absolutely, whose presence was safety, whose appearance in the forest was the appearance of everything that Callisto's vow was organized around. He appeared as the huntress goddess, as the companion of the young women who followed her, as the person in whose company Callisto was entirely safe. And in that form he came to her. Callisto's response to what she experienced was the response of someone who understood, after the fact, what had actually happened. The figure she had trusted had not been who it appeared to be. The safety she had believed herself to be in had been a deception. The vow she had made, the commitment that was the foundation of her life in the forest with Artemis, had been violated in a way that she had not consented to and could not have prevented. She was pregnant. For some time, Callisto kept her pregnancy hidden. This required considerable effort and considerable anxiety. She was one of a group of young women who lived together and traveled together and bathed together in the streams and pools of the wild places. Concealing a pregnancy in those circumstances was not easily done. Eventually, it was discovered. The accounts of the discovery vary. In some versions, it was Artemis herself who discovered the pregnancy when the company of huntresses bathed in a forest pool. In others, it was Hera who discovered it. In still others, it was Zeus who acted preemptively when the pregnancy became visible. What all the accounts share is the transformation. Callisto was changed into a bear, a large female bear, dark-coated, placed in the forest she had hunted through as a human, now hunting through it on four legs with a bear's senses and a bear's relationship to the world she had once moved through upright. The transformation was a punishment, or was presented as one, though the specific crime being punished and the specific being doing the punishing varied across the sources. If Hera performed the transformation, it was the familiar pattern of Hera's revenge. The king of gods had pursued a woman. The woman had been the vehicle of the transgression, and Hera directed her response not at Zeus, but at the woman. Callisto, who had not chosen what happened to her, who had been deceived by a god wearing the face of the being she most trusted, was punished for having been deceived. If Artemis performed the transformation, it was the punishment for violation of the vow. Artemis, who governed the company of huntresses through the specific condition of chastity, who maintained that condition herself with a fierceness that the mythology documented repeatedly, could not continue to include in her company a woman who was pregnant. The vow had been violated. Even if the violation was not Callisto's fault, even if the violation had been the result of a divine deception that Callisto had no way to recognize or resist. Either way, Callisto became a bear. She still gave birth. The mythology is specific about this. The transformation had not ended the pregnancy. The pregnancy had continued in her new form. And in the forest where she now lived as a bear, she gave birth to a son, Arcas, the son of Zeus and the bear woman. He was taken from the forest and raised as a human by Maia, the same nymph who was the mother of Hermes, or by others depending on the source. He grew up knowing his name and his human identity, but not the full story of what had happened to his mother, or not understanding it completely. He grew up to be a hunter. This is one of the mythology's most characteristic ironies. The son of a woman who had been a hunter, who had been transformed into the animal that was hunted, grew up to hunt. He was good at it. He had the quality of a hunter born. He moved through the same forests where his mother moved, though as a man moving through them and not as the bear that she had become. One day he encountered a bear in the forest. He did not know the bear was his mother. He raised his spear. Zeus saw what was about to happen. He intervened, not for Callisto's sake, not specifically or not only, but because the specific act that was about to happen, a son killing his mother, even unknowingly, was the kind of act that the Erinyes were born for. The Furies, born from the blood of Uranus, existed specifically to pursue those who shed the blood of family. If Arcas killed the bear that was Callisto, the chain of divine consequence that would follow would be catastrophic. The Erinyes would pursue him. The divine order would be disrupted by the specific kind of family blood violation that the mythology treated as the worst category of transgression. Zeus placed them both in the sky. He transformed Callisto from a bear into a constellation and placed her in the northern sky. The Great Bear, Ursa Major, the constellation that circles the north celestial pole, never setting below the horizon in the latitudes of Greece, always present in the northern sky at every hour of every night of every season. Arcas became Ursa Minor, the little bear, his own constellation, circling closer to the pole, with the pole star at the end of his tail, the fixed point around which all the other stars appeared to rotate. Mother and son, together in the sky, permanent, elevated beyond the reach of whatever had happened to them on the earth below, above the forest where Callisto had hunted and then been hunted, above the specific landscape of her suffering and her transformation. In the sky, which was Zeus's domain, placed there by the god who had set the whole chain of events in motion. Hera was not pleased with this resolution. She went to Oceanus and Tethys, the ancient Titan couple who governed the encircling river at the boundary of the world. She asked them to ensure that the Great Bear never descended below the horizon to rest in the ocean that surrounded the world. Other constellations dipped below the horizon and rose again. The Great Bear, by Hera's command, never set. It circled the poles ceaselessly, never sinking into the ocean's rest, never given the nightly respite that the other stars received. This is why, in the Greek understanding, the Great Bear never set. Why the constellation of Ursa Major was circumpolar, always above the horizon, never resting. Because Hera's last word in the story of Callisto was to deny the constellation the rest that other stars received, to ensure that even in the sky, even transformed beyond the reach of human affairs, the mark of what had happened to her was present. Callisto's story is one of the clearest in the mythology about the specific way that power operated in the ancient divine world. She did not seek Zeus's attention. She had organized her life around the specific set of choices that kept her away from exactly the kind of situation she ended up in. She had made a vow. She had joined Artemis's company. She had chosen the forest and the hunt and the community of women who had made the same choice. And Zeus came to her wearing the face of the being she most trusted, and he took what she had not offered. And she was punished for it by Hera, who punished her for being the object of Zeus's desire, by Artemis, who punished her for the violation of a vow she had not consented to violate, by the world, which treated her transformation into a bear as a consequence of something she had done rather than something that had been done to her. And even in the sky, even after Zeus had elevated her beyond the reach of further earthly harm, Hera arranged that she would not rest, that the circling would be permanent, that even the relief of setting would be denied. The mythology preserved her name. It gave her a place in the sky that every navigator and every night traveler in the ancient Mediterranean world knew and used. Sailors found north by the Great Bear. Farmers tracked the seasons by its position. The bear that Callisto became circled the poles ceaselessly, and in that circling served a purpose, was used, was consulted, was necessary to those who moved through the night. She was used after her death, as she had been used in her life. But she was there. She was visible. She was the first thing you learned to find in the night sky if you wanted to know where north was. And she was remembered by name. Callisto, the most beautiful, the huntress who became the bear, who became the constellation that tells you which direction to travel when you are lost in the dark. Look north. She is there. Leda was the queen of Sparta, the wife of Tyndareus, the king of Lacedaemon, the ruler of the city that would one day become the most feared military power in the Greek world. She was a queen, a woman of status and position and the specific dignity that queenship carried in the ancient world. She had a life. She had a husband. She had the domestic and the political arrangements of a royal existence. And one day by the river Eurotas, or in her garden, or wherever the different sources locate the encounter, she met a swan. The swan came to her in distress. Or the swan came to her simply as a swan came, with the specific beauty that swans have, the long white neck and the powerful wings, and the specific grace of a large bird on the water. Swans were sacred to Apollo in the Greek tradition, associated with music and with the light of the divine. They were beautiful in a way that invited approach rather than distance. This swan was being pursued. An eagle was chasing it, in some versions of the story. The swan was desperate. It needed shelter. It came to Leda and sought her protection in the specific way that the pursued seeks the protection of someone who seems capable of offering it. Leda sheltered the swan. She took it in her arms. She held it against her body, the warmth of the bird against the warmth of the woman, the feathers pressed close. The swan that was not a swan nestled in the arms of the queen who did not know it was not a swan. Zeus had transformed himself again. As he had been a bull for Europa and a cloud of gold for Danaë and a god in disguise for Callisto, he was a swan for Leda. The specific form chosen for each pursuit was not random. Each form was selected for its specific quality of approach, for the specific way it would make the target receptive. The bull in the meadow was beautiful and gentle and invited touching. The golden rain was something that fell from above, inevitable and divine. The eagle pursuing the swan was designed to produce exactly what it produced, a woman who opened her arms to the pursued bird, who held it close, who gave it shelter. The shelter became the union. Leda bore children, but the manner of their birth was different from any birth that the mythology had described before. She laid eggs, 2 eggs, The divine origin of the conception, the fact that Zeus had come to her in the form of a swan, and that she had also been with her human husband Tyndareus around the same time, produced this specific and strange result. The children were born from eggs rather than from the ordinary process of human birth. From the first egg came Helen and Polydeuces. From the second egg came Clytemnestra and Castor. Or the distribution varied across different sources, with different children assigned to different eggs and different fathers. The mythology was not consistent about which children were divine, which were human, and which egg each came from. What all the sources agreed on was the children themselves. Helen was the most beautiful woman in the world. This is not a subjective assessment or a matter of opinion within the mythology. It was a statement of divine fact. Helen was the most beautiful mortal woman who had ever existed or ever would exist. Her beauty was not simply a matter of physical features, though it included those. It was a quality of presence, a luminosity, a radiance that was the direct inheritance of her divine father. She was the daughter of Zeus, and the daughter of the king of gods carried something of the divine quality that her father embodied. The most beautiful woman in the world was also the most dangerous woman in the world, not through any malice of her own, but through the simple logic of what the most beautiful woman in the world inevitably attracted. Every man who saw her wanted her. Every king who heard of her wanted her. The competition for Helen's hand produced the political tensions that the Trojan War would eventually express in the most catastrophic way. Her first husband was Theseus, the hero of Athens, who abducted her when she was a child because he had decided he would marry no one but the daughter of Zeus. He was eventually forced to return her. Then Tyndareus, her mortal father, arranged her marriage properly. Every king in Greece sent suitors. The number was so large and the tensions were so high that Tyndareus, on Odysseus's advice, made all the suitors swear an oath before the wedding. They all swore that they would come to the defense of whoever was chosen as Helen's husband if that husband were ever wronged through Helen. They swore, and then Menelaus was chosen, and they dispersed. The oath that all the kings of Greece swore at Helen's wedding was the oath that would bring them to Troy when Paris took her from Menelaus's house. The beauty of Helen was the cause of the Trojan War, not in the sense that she chose to cause it, but in the sense that the competition her beauty produced made the conditions of the war inevitable. She was the daughter of a swan and a queen. She was the face that launched 1,000 ships, as Marlowe would write 2,000 years later. She was the most consequential beauty in the mythology. The Dioscuri, the two sons of Leda, the heavenly twins, the divine brothers who were among the most loved of all the divine figures in the ancient world. Castor and Polydeuces, or in the Latin that made them famous throughout the Roman world, Castor and Pollux. One of them was divine. Polydeuces was the son of Zeus, born from the same egg as Helen, carrying the divine quality of his father in the specific form of invulnerability. He could not be killed in the ordinary way that mortal beings could be killed. He was effectively immortal in battle. Castor was mortal, the son of Tyndareus, the human king. He was a great horseman, possibly the greatest horseman in the mythology, with a specific skill with horses that exceeded anything any other mortal possessed. He was brave and capable and skilled, but he did not have his brother's divine invulnerability. He could be killed. The brothers were inseparable. The mythology consistently presents them as a pair, as two beings who functioned as a unit in a way that made their individual distinction less important than their combined presence. They went everywhere together. They fought together. They were the most loyal and the most devoted pair of brothers in the mythology. They sailed with Jason on the Argo, which is where some of their most famous individual stories took place. Polydeuces was the boxer of the expedition, winning a famous match against the king Amycus. Castor handled the horses and the cavalry aspects of their adventures. They rescued their sister Helen when Theseus had taken her. They were the models of fraternal loyalty. And then Castor was killed. The specific circumstances of his death varied across the sources. What was consistent was the result. Castor died. The mortal twin died. And Polydeuces, the divine twin, was immortal and therefore would go on living while his brother was in the underworld. This was not acceptable to Polydeuces. He went to Zeus, his father, and he asked for the thing that the mythology had not offered before. He asked to share his immortality with his dead brother, not to give it up entirely for Castor, though he was willing to do that too, but to divide it, to be alive some of the time and in the underworld some of the time, so that Castor could be alive some of the time and in the underworld some of the time, to share the existence that his divine nature gave him rather than keeping it entirely for himself. Zeus agreed. The Dioscuri alternated. One day above the earth, one day below. One day alive, one day in the realm of the dead. They spent their immortality together, each in the other's company, but in the specific arrangement that allowed a mortal and an immortal to share what they had across the boundary that would otherwise have separated them permanently. They were placed in the sky as the constellation Gemini, the twins, the two bright stars of the twin constellation, Castor and Pollux side by side, rising together and setting together, spending their celestial existence in the permanent companionship that their earthly devotion to each other had earned. Sailors loved them. The Dioscuri were the patrons of sailors, the divine presences that appeared as the electrical phenomenon that occurs at the tops of ships' masts during storms, what sailors called St. Elmo's fire. When you saw the light at the top of the mast during a storm, you were seeing the Dioscuri. You were seeing the brothers. You were seeing the specific divine protection of the two sons of Leda and the Swan, the companions of the Argo, the rescuers of their sister, the loyal brothers who had found a way to share mortality and immortality so that they would never be separated. Leda bore 2 eggs, and from those eggs came the most beautiful woman who ever lived, and the most devoted brothers in the mythology, and the woman who would become the wife of Agamemnon and the indirect cause of the house of Atreus' catastrophe. Leda herself is remembered mostly for the specific quality of her story's approach. The swan in the arms of the queen. The moment of shelter becoming the moment of union. The specific mechanism by which Zeus came to her, which has been depicted more often than perhaps any other scene in the mythology across the entire history of Western art, from ancient vases to Renaissance paintings to modern reimaginings. She is remembered in the children she bore and in the specific strangeness of how she bore them. The eggs, the divine inheritance distributed unevenly between mortal and immortal twins. The beauty that changed the world and the loyalty that transcended the boundary between life and death. Leda, the queen of Sparta, who held a swan against her body by the river Eurotas. From that holding came Helen, whose face sailed 1,000 ships. And from that holding came Castor and Polydeuces, who shone at the tops of ships' masts in storms and told sailors that they were not alone. The swan was Zeus, but the children were Leda's, and the world was different for all of them. There was a prophecy about Danaë's father. King Acrisius of Argos had gone to the oracle at Delphi with a question that kings with daughters and no sons often asked. He wanted to know if he would ever have a male heir. The oracle's answer was not what he wanted to hear. He would have no son, but his daughter would have a son, and that son would kill him. Acrisius returned to Argos with the prophecy sitting in him the way prophecies sat in powerful men who heard them. Heavy, permanent, impossible to reason away or argue with, but impossible to simply accept. The logic of the prophecy was clear, and its logic led to a clear response. The same response that had produced the swallowing of children and the imprisonment of the unusual, and the long history of powerful men trying to use force to prevent the future from arriving. He could not kill his daughter. The mythology is specific about this. He considered it and did not do it, whether out of affection for Danaë or out of the religious prohibition against shedding family blood, or some combination of both. He could not bring himself to kill her, but he could remove her from the world in which the prophecy could fulfill itself. He built a chamber, underground, or in a tower depending on the source, made of bronze, sealed, a place with no entrance except the one that Acrisius controlled, a place from which Danaë could not leave and into which no man could enter without Acrisius's knowledge. He put Danaë in the chamber. He sealed it. He left a guard. He told himself that the prophecy required a son, that a son required a man, and that no man could reach his daughter in this chamber. The logic was as sound as any logic that tried to prevent the future from being what it was going to be, which is to say it was technically correct in every specific detail and completely insufficient as a prophylactic against what was going to happen. Zeus saw Danaë. How he saw her in the sealed bronze chamber the mythology does not explain, because Zeus's ability to see and to reach was not constrained by the limits of ordinary vision. He was the sky god. He could perceive from above. He could find what he wanted to find when he wanted to find it, and the sealed bronze chamber of a Peloponnesian king was not going to prevent him. He came to her as golden rain. The transformation was different from the bull and the swan. Those had been living forms, animal shapes that moved through the world and could approach and be approached. The golden rain was something entirely different, not a creature, a phenomenon. The sky itself opening and pouring something precious and warm and golden down into the sealed chamber through whatever small opening existed, through whatever narrow gap in the bronze construction allowed in the faintest thread of light. Golden rain, falling in a shaft of light into the darkness where Danaë was confined. Warm, luminous, coming from above, from the sky, from the God who governed the sky. The specific quality of the transformation was the quality of divine light descending. Not earthbound, not animal-shaped, but pure falling radiance. The golden rain was perhaps the most honest of Zeus's disguises in the sense that it most fully expressed what he actually was. He was the sky god. He came to her as the sky itself, as the light that fell from his domain into the enclosed space where she was held. The gold of the rain was the gold of divine presence, the specific quality of divine light that Thea governed when she gave to shining things their quality of shining. Danaë became pregnant, and in the sealed bronze chamber, guarded against the entry of men, she gave birth to Perseus. Acrisius found out. The mythology does not specify how he learned about the birth, whether he discovered it himself or was told by the guards or by Danaë herself, who could hardly have hidden it indefinitely. He found out that his sealed chamber had not been as sealed as he believed, that the sky had found the gap in his bronze logic, that his daughter had a son. He was afraid. The prophecy had been precise. This son would kill him. This infant in the arms of his daughter, red-faced and new to the world, was the instrument of his death. That was what the oracle had said. And again he found himself unable to kill them directly, unable to kill his daughter, the child of his body, unable to kill the infant, whose crime was having been born. The mythology presents this reluctance not as weakness exactly, but as the persistence of something, some connection to the bonds of family that even a man governed by fear could not entirely override. He found the indirect method. He put Danaë and Perseus into a wooden chest, a large box, barely large enough for a woman and an infant, with enough space to breathe, but nothing else. And he had the chest thrown into the sea. The sea would do what he could not bring himself to do directly. The box would sink or drift until it sank, and Danaë and Perseus would drown in the sea that Poseidon governed, and the prophecy would be prevented by the ocean rather than by Acrisius's own hand. The chest floated. Zeus watched from the sky. The sea accepted the chest, and the chest floated rather than sinking. Poseidon, the god of the sea, did not sink the chest that contained the child of Zeus. Whether this was a direct divine intervention or simply the accident of a well-made box, the mythology places it in the category of divine protection. The king of gods watched over the chest that carried his son. It drifted. For how long the mythology does not say precisely. Long enough to cross the Aegean from the waters near Argos to the island of Seriphos, one of the smaller Cyclades islands in the central Aegean. Long enough for the infant Perseus to survive in a wooden box in the sea, which required either divine protection or remarkable luck, and the mythology was never in the business of distinguishing carefully between those two things. A fisherman named Dictys found the chest. He opened it. He found a woman and a small child. He took them in. He gave them shelter. He cared for them with the hospitality that the ancient world considered sacred, the specific obligation to care for those who arrived at your threshold in need, regardless of who they were or where they had come from. Danaë and Perseus had land under their feet. Perseus had a childhood. He grew up on Seriphos, the small rocky island in the middle of the Aegean. The son of Zeus and the daughter of Acrisius, who had been placed in a box and thrown into the sea to drown, grew up on an island under the care of a fisherman who had found them floating. The childhood on Seriphos was not the end of Danaë's difficulties. The king of Seriphos, Polydectes, wanted Danaë. He wanted her with the specific quality of desire that powerful men brought to women they wanted and could not simply take, which was the quality of finding an indirect method, a way of removing the obstacle to having what he wanted. The obstacle was Perseus, the young man who had grown up on Seriphos, who was now old enough and strong enough to protect his mother, who would not allow Polydectes to take Danaë against her will. Polydectes arranged a competition. He said he wanted to marry another woman and asked each man of means to contribute a gift toward the wedding. The traditional gift was a horse. Perseus had no horse. He was the son of a woman who had been thrown into the sea in a box. He had no property, but he was proud, and in his pride, he offered something beyond his means. He offered anything that Polydectes asked for, any gift, whatever the king wanted. Polydectes asked for the head of the Gorgon Medusa, and Perseus, who had offered anything, had no choice but to go. The story of Perseus and Medusa is the story of the first great hero of the mythology, the son of the golden rain and the imprisoned princess. It belongs to a later section of this account, but it begins here, with the prophecy that a man would die, and the king who built a bronze chamber to prevent the prophecy, and the sky that rained gold through the gap in the bronze, and the wooden box that floated across the Aegean and the fisherman who opened it. From the box came Perseus, the hero, the one who would kill Medusa and rescue Andromeda, and eventually, by the specific mechanism of accident rather than intention, fulfill the prophecy that had caused all of this. That would kill Acrisius not in battle, not in revenge, but in the specific way that prophecies fulfill themselves. Through the accident that all the precautions in the world had failed to prevent. But that too is a later story. For now, Perseus was a child on a rocky Aegean island, the son of golden rain, the child who had floated across the sea in a box, the future hero growing up by the water, learning to be what he would become. And Danaë, his mother, was watching over him on the island where they had washed up together, having survived what her father had built to prevent her son's existence. Having floated where she was supposed to sink, the prophecy was still in motion. It always had been. Alcmene was the most virtuous woman in the world. The ancient sources say this explicitly and consistently. Not simply that she was good, or that she was faithful, or that she was honorable in the ordinary way that good people were honorable. She was held up as the exemplar, the human woman who most completely embodied the qualities that the ancient world valued in women. Her loyalty to her husband, her fidelity, her complete refusal of any relationship outside the one she had chosen. Her husband was Amphitryon, a hero of Thebes, a man of honor and of battle, a man who had been forced to leave Thebes under difficult circumstances related to the accidental killing of his father-in-law. He and Alcmene had a complicated history that involved Amphitryon going on a campaign before they had consummated their marriage, a campaign that Alcmene had set as the condition of the marriage, a campaign related to the avenging of her brother's deaths at the hands of the Taphian pirates. She had told him, "Come back victorious, come back having avenged my brothers, and then we will be fully together." It was not a test of his love. It was the specific condition of a woman who understood what she required and who expressed that requirement clearly. Amphitryon went on his campaign, and Zeus came to Alcmene, not as a bull or a swan or golden ring. He came as Amphitryon. He came in the form of her husband, returning in triumph from the campaign that Alcmene had set as her condition. He came with the details, with the knowledge of the specific events of Amphitryon's campaign that a returning soldier would have had. He came with the face and the voice and the manner of the man she had been waiting for. Alcmene received him. She received her husband, as she believed, returning in victory. She gave to the man she loved what she had been saving for him. She was faithful to her husband in every sense that faithfulness can be understood, faithful in her desire and her intention. The fact that the man she received was not her husband was the specific mechanism of the deception, the mechanism that made this story different from the others. Zeus made the night last 3 times as long as ordinary nights. He told Helios not to drive the sun chariot on that day. He arranged for the darkness to extend, for the night that he shared with Alcmene to be 3 times the length of any normal night, 3 times the opportunity, 3 times the darkness in which the deception could operate without the revealing light of day. The real Amphitryon returned the next day. He came home from his campaign, victorious as he had promised to be, with the news of his victories ready to share with the wife who had been waiting for him. He came to Alcmene with the specific joy of the returning soldier, the specific anticipation of reunion. And Alcmene greeted him with mild puzzlement. She had already heard all of this. She had already celebrated with him last night. She had already received him in all the ways a wife received a returning husband. Why was he telling her again what he had already told her? Amphitryon was equally puzzled. He had not been here last night. He had just arrived. What she was describing had not happened. They both went to the seer Tiresias, the blind prophet of Thebes who saw what others could not see precisely, because the ordinary visual world did not distract him from what was actually happening. Tiresias told them the truth. The husband who had visited Alcmene the previous night had been Zeus. The king of gods had taken the form of Amphitryon and had come to the most faithful woman in the world because he had wanted a son of extraordinary quality, and he had understood that the specific virtues of Alcmene's nature would combine with his divine nature to produce something that the world had not seen before. Amphitryon understood. He accepted it. This was Zeus. You did not express anger at Zeus for what Zeus had done in your home with your wife, not if you valued your continued existence. And the mythology presents his acceptance not as resignation, but as the response of a man who understood the divine order and knew where the boundaries of his authority ended. He loved Alcmene. He continued to love her. He remained her husband. He raised the child that was born as his own, with genuine affection and genuine commitment. Amphitryon is one of the less celebrated figures in the mythology of the heroic age, but his response to an extraordinary situation was one of the most dignified. Alcmene was pregnant, and Hera knew. Of course Hera knew. She always knew. And this time the pregnancy was the pregnancy of the child that Zeus had specifically told her would be his greatest hero. The child born from the most virtuous mortal woman. The child who would be the greatest hero the world had ever produced. The child whose birth Zeus had planned with a specific intention that made it different from his other unions with mortal women. Hera responded with the full force of her divine anger. She sent Eileithyia, the goddess of childbirth, to prevent the birth. Eileithyia sat outside the room where Alcmene was in labor, with her hands clasped and her legs crossed, the specific posture that the ancient world associated with the magical prevention of birth. The labor continued without the birth. Alcmene suffered and could not deliver. A servant woman named Galanthus deceived Eileithyia. She ran out of the room and announced loudly that Alcmene had given birth, that the child had been born. Eileithyia's concentration was broken by the surprise, and she uncrossed her legs and her hands. And in that moment Alcmene gave birth to Heracles. Galanthus was punished by Hera for the deception. She was transformed into a weasel, doomed to give birth through her mouth for the rest of her existence. The punishment shaped to fit the crime of the mouth that had spoken the lie that broke the binding. The mythology preserved her name and her transformation as a monument to the specific kind of deception that could sometimes break the most powerful magic. Alcmene gave birth to twins. On the same night that she gave birth to Heracles, the son of Zeus, she also gave birth to Iphicles, the son of Amphitryon. The divine child and the mortal child, born within hours of each other, sons of the same mother and different fathers, who would live their lives with the specific difference between them visible in every quality they expressed. Heracles was everything that the divine parentage and the virtuous mortal mother together could produce. The strongest man who had ever lived. The most courageous. The most enduring. Capable of things that no other mortal could accomplish. Not because of divine protection, but because of what he fundamentally was. The physical and moral qualities that his parents had combined to create. He was also, from the first, the target of Hera's relentless hatred. He was an infant, days old or months old depending on the source, sleeping in his cradle in the house of Amphitryon in Thebes. Hera sent serpents, 2 great serpents, divine monsters, sent into the nursery in the night to kill the infant in his cradle. To kill the son of Zeus before he could become the hero that Zeus had intended him to become. To end the story before it began, the serpents entered the cradle. Iphicles, the mortal twin, screamed. He reacted the way an infant reacted to the sudden presence of large snakes in the darkness, with the total terror of something too young to understand what snakes were, but old enough to respond to the presence of immediate threat. Heracles reached for them. He grabbed them, one in each hand. The infant, who was the son of Zeus and the most virtuous woman in the world, grabbed the divine serpents that Hera had sent to kill him, and he squeezed. He held them with the grip of something that was already more than an infant, with the strength that was his divine inheritance expressed in the body of a baby. He strangled both of them. When Amphitryon came running at the sound of Iphicles screaming, he found the mortal twin terrified and Heracles sitting in the cradle with a dead serpent in each hand, holding them up, apparently pleased with what he had accomplished. This story established, from the first moment of his life, what Heracles was. The strength was present from birth. The capacity to take hold of something that was trying to kill him and hold on until it was dead was present from birth. The mythology was telling you, in the cradle scene, everything you needed to know about the nature of the hero who would strangle the Nemean lion and cut the heads off the Hydra and hold up the sky, while Atlas briefly rested and do the rest of the extraordinary things that the 12 labors required. He was not going to be ordinary. He was never going to be ordinary. The serpents in the cradle were Hera's opening salvo in the war she would wage against Heracles for his entire life. A war not against an enemy who had wronged her. A war against the child whose only crime was being the child that Zeus had made her acknowledge as his most important. The most direct product of the king of gods' infidelity. The child he was most proud of. The child he had specifically told her would be his greatest hero. She would pursue him for his entire life. She would send him the madness that caused him to kill his wife and children. She would arrange the circumstances that led to the 12 labors. She would be the constant divine opposition that made Heracles' extraordinary accomplishments necessary. But he was already the son of Zeus and Alcmene, already holding the dead serpents in the cradle, already what he was going to be. Alcmene looked at him, the most virtuous woman in the world, who had received a god without knowing he was a god, who had given birth to a hero whose life would be the longest and the hardest and the most consequential of any hero in the mythology. She looked at her son. He looked back at her with the eyes of a child and the hands of something more than a child. She held him. Semele was different. This is what the mythology suggests, beneath the surface of the story, in the specific qualities of how Zeus came to her, and what he did that was unlike what he had done with Io, or Europa, or Callisto, or Leda, or Danaë. With those women, Zeus had come in disguise. He had been a bull, a swan, a cloud, a shower of gold, another man's face. He had concealed himself. He had approached through indirection. With Semele, he came as himself. Not immediately, not at first. He came to her in human form, as a mortal man, which was still a disguise, but a different kind of disguise from an animal or a phenomenon of nature. He came as someone she could meet and talk to and know in the way that a woman knows a man she has spent time with. He came as someone with a face and a voice and a presence that was more personal than a bull in a meadow or golden rain through a crack in a bronze ceiling. And then he told her who he was. He revealed himself. He chose to be known. With all the other women in the mythology of Zeus's loves, the revelation of identity was either never fully given or came at the end, after the fact. as an explanation rather than an offer. Io understood what had happened after the cloud and the transformation. Europa understood when she was already on the sea. Alcmene understood through the prophecy of Tiresias after the fact. Semele was told. He told her he was Zeus, and she believed him. And their relationship continued with that knowledge present, with her knowing what she was in relationship with the specific quality of a mortal woman who was the lover of the king of gods and who knew it. This gave her something the other women had not had: a claim, a relationship based on acknowledged identity rather than deception. When she asked him to swear by the Styx, when she made him take the oath that bound even gods, she was doing what a woman could only do if she knew who she was dealing with. She was making a demand of Zeus as Zeus, not as the disguised version of him. The demand destroyed her. This is the specific tragedy of Semele, the tragedy that distinguishes her from the other women in the mythology of Zeus's loves. It was not simply that Zeus came to her. It was that she knew who he was, and knowing who he was, she asked to see him as he actually was, and seeing him as he actually was killed her. Hera knew about Semele. She knew about all of them. But Semele presented a specific opportunity that the others had not presented, because Semele knew the truth of what was happening. She could be approached as someone who could be reasoned with, who could be convinced, who had enough information to be manipulated by someone who added slightly more to it. Hera came to her as an old woman, a nurse, a familiar, comfortable presence who asked about her lover. The conversation Hera had with Semele was calculated with precision. Hera did not rage at her. She did not threaten her. She did not confront her with the divine anger that Hera was capable of directing at the women who became entangled with her husband. She played the role of the sympathetic older woman, the advisor, the friend who had concerns. She asked questions that were designed to plant doubt. If he is truly Zeus, she said, why does he not come to you as he comes to me, his wife, the queen of gods? He comes to me in his full divine glory, in his complete divine form, with his lightning and his thunder. If he loves you as he claims to love you, why does he give you a lesser version of himself? Why does he keep his true form from you? The doubt she planted was precisely calibrated, not the doubt that Zeus was Zeus, which Semele already believed, but the doubt about the quality of the love. The suggestion that being kept from the full reality of what Zeus was expressed a lesser relationship than the one she believed she had. That the man who came to her in human form was, in his concealment, expressing something that a more fully given love would not conceal. Semele heard this, and she felt it. The specific quality of a concern that comes from someone who seems to care about you, telling you something that you did not want to know. The seed of the question that Hera had planted. Not is he Zeus, but does he fully love you? When Zeus came to her next, Semele asked him to swear. By the Styx, the most binding oath in creation, Zeus swore. He was willing. He loved Semele, or felt for her what he felt for the women he pursued, which the mythology consistently described with the language of love, even when the actions that surrounded that love were not always loving. He swore because she asked, and he was generous with her in the way he was not always generous with others. Grant me whatever I ask, she said. He agreed. She asked to see him in his full divine form. The change in Zeus's expression at this moment is not described in any ancient source, but it is imaginable. He understood immediately what had happened. He understood who had spoken to Semele. He understood what the oath meant in combination with this request. He understood that he had just sworn by the Styx to do something that would destroy the woman he was swearing to. He tried to argue her out of it. He suggested other wishes. He offered anything else. He told her, in whatever way a god who had revealed himself to a mortal could tell her, that what she was asking for was not survivable, that the full divine presence of Zeus was something mortal eyes and mortal bodies could not contain, that to see him as he truly was, as the king of gods in the full expression of his divine nature, with the lightning and the thunder and the overwhelming quality of the sky itself embodied in a being standing before her, would kill her. She did not understand the magnitude of what he was describing, or she could not fully believe it, because the man who stood before her was someone she had known and touched and talked to and loved in the specific, intimate way of two people who had been together. She knew him as a person even as she knew he was a god. And the specific experience of knowing someone as a person made it difficult to fully believe in the magnitude of what he was as a god. She insisted. He had sworn by the Styx. He came to her as himself. The light was not like ordinary light. It was not even like the strongest sunlight, which is itself overwhelming if you look at it directly. It was the light of the sky itself concentrated in the form of a being, the atmospheric force that produced lightning and thunder and the quality of the air before a storm, all of it present simultaneously in the specific space where Zeus was standing. Semele could not bear it. She burned from within. The mortal body, which was made of the same materials as every other mortal body, water and carbon, and the specific chemistry of the living, could not contain the energy of the full divine presence. She was consumed by what she had asked to see. She died. Zeus caught the unborn child. He took the infant from the burning and placed it in his own thigh, sewing the opening closed, completing the gestation in his own divine body. The child that Semele had been carrying was born twice, once from a mortal mother who burned in the seeing of his divine father, and once from the divine father's own body when the time was complete. Dionysus, the twice-born, the god of the irrational and the dissolving ecstasy, born from the meeting of the mortal and the divine in its most extreme and most catastrophic form. Semele's story holds a specific place in the sequence of Zeus's loves because it is the only one in which the mortal woman was fully present to what was happening. She knew who Zeus was. She had a relationship with him that was acknowledged on both sides. She made demands of him, real demands, backed by the most binding oath in creation, and she died of it. The women who did not know they were with Zeus, the ones he came to in disguise, were wronged by the deception. But they survived. Io wandered and suffered and eventually was restored. Europa was carried across the sea but came to rest in Crete and bore 3 sons. Danaë was put in a box and floated across the Aegean but arrived on Seriphos. Alcmene bore the greatest hero in the mythology. Leda bore Helen and the Dioscuri. Semele, who knew, who was told, who had the relationship that was based on truth rather than disguise, died from the truth. The mythology was making a specific observation about the nature of divine reality and its relationship to mortal capacity. The truth about what Zeus was, the full reality of the King of Gods in his complete divine expression, was not survivable for a mortal. The accommodated truth, the Zeus who came in human form, and the Zeus who was a bull, and the Zeus who was golden rain, these were versions of the divine that the mortal world could contain. The unaccommodated truth destroyed the container. Semele wanted the unaccommodated truth. She asked for it explicitly. She made the King of Gods swear to give it to her, and she could not survive it. Her son, Dionysus, was the god who understood both sides of this. born from a mortal who burned in the divine, and a divine who completed him in the divine's own body, born with the mortal and the immortal both in him. The god who understood what it cost to stand at the boundary between those two worlds, because his very existence was that boundary. He was the god who offered mortals the temporary experience of dissolution, of losing the boundaries of self, of briefly feeling something of what it was like to be in contact with what was larger than the ordinary human scale. Not the full contact that killed his mother, but a managed version of it. Wine and music and the ecstatic ceremony of his worship, offering mortals the taste of the divine that Semele had sought in its fullest and most fatal form. She had wanted to see Zeus as he was. Her son spent his divine life offering mortals the lesser version of that seeing, the seeing that they could survive, in honor, perhaps, of the mother who wanted to see more than she could bear. Metis was different from all the others. When we place her in the sequence of Zeus's loves, after Io and Europa and Callisto and Leda and Danaë and Alcmene and Semele, her story stands apart in ways that illuminate everything around it. She was not a mortal woman. She was not a nymph. She was not even a minor divine being of limited power. Metis was a Titaness, the daughter of Oceanus and Tethys, an ancient being of the generation before the Olympians. And she was, in the estimation of every ancient source that mentioned her, the wisest being in creation after Gaia herself. Her name meant wisdom, or counsel, or the kind of practical intelligence that navigated situations where brute force was insufficient. Not theoretical wisdom, not the accumulation of knowledge for its own sake. The specific wisdom that knew how to act, that understood situations completely and responded to them with the most effective possible action. The wisdom that was always asking not just what is true, but what should be done. Zeus wanted her. This was not unusual for Zeus. But the nature of his wanting was different here. He did not simply desire Metis in the way he desired Io or Europa. He wanted her wisdom. He wanted access to the specific quality of intelligence that she possessed, the quality that he recognized as essential and that he knew he did not fully have on his own. He was the king of gods. He was the most powerful being alive. But power without wisdom was what Kronos had been, and Kronos had swallowed his children and been overthrown. Zeus had grown up knowing the cost of power without wisdom. He had spent his hidden years on Crete developing the patience and the strategy that power alone could not have given him. He understood the value of what Metis had. He pursued her. She resisted. The mythology gives us one of its characteristic transformation chase sequences, in which Metis changed her form repeatedly to escape Zeus's pursuit. She became various animals and natural phenomena. Zeus followed, changing his own form to match hers, pursuing through every transformation. Eventually she stopped running. She became his wife, the first wife, before Hera, before any of the other unions. The Titaness of wisdom and the king of gods joined. But there was a prophecy. Of course there was a prophecy. The mythology of Zeus's early reign was structured by prophecies the way his father's reign had been structured by them. The prophetic tradition knew what the wheel of divine succession looked like, and it kept speaking the truth about where the wheel was going to turn next. The prophecy about Metis said this. The first child of Metis would be a daughter equal in wisdom to her father. The second child would be a son greater than his father, greater than Zeus, strong enough to overthrow him the way Zeus had overthrown Kronos, the way Kronos had overthrown Uranus. The wheel again. The wheel that had been turning since Uranus looked at the Cyclopes with fear. The wheel that the mythology kept showing would turn again regardless of what precautions were taken. Zeus heard the prophecy, and he knew exactly what it meant. He had heard the same prediction from a different direction his entire life. He was the child who was going to overthrow the father. He was the one the prophecy had been about when he was in the cave on Crete and Kronos was swallowing stones. Now he was the father. Now the prophecy was about him. He looked at Metis and he understood that the first child, the daughter equal in wisdom to her father, was already inside her, already developing, already on her way to the world. He acted. He swallowed Metis. Not in the way Kronos had swallowed his children, not to contain a threat that already existed. He swallowed the pregnancy. He swallowed the mother of the child and the child together, before the daughter could be born and before the son could be conceived. He took Metis inside himself before the prophecy could develop past its first stage. This was not Kronos' strategy. Kronos had swallowed children. Zeus swallowed wisdom. The distinction was not simply tactical. It expressed something about the difference between the two rulers. Kronos had tried to eliminate the threat. Zeus had tried to internalize it. Metis did not die. She continued to exist inside Zeus. She continued to think, which was what Metis did, which was what her nature required, and what no act of swallowing could prevent. She continued to counsel. She spoke to Zeus from inside him, her wisdom now directly accessible to the King of Gods in the most intimate possible way. Not external counsel, not the advice of a being you could choose to ignore. The counsel of someone who was inside your own thinking, whose perspective was woven into your own cognition. Zeus, who had swallowed wisdom, had wisdom. Not simply the wisdom he had developed himself, through the hard education of growing up hidden and the hard labor of winning the Titanomachy, but the wisdom of Metis, the Titaness who was the wisest being in creation after Gaia, available to him from within. This changed him. The Zeus who governed after swallowing Metis was not quite the same king who had governed before. There was a quality in his judgments, in the specific way he navigated the complicated situations that the King of Gods constantly faced, that the mythology attributed to the presence of Metis. When Zeus made a decision that was genuinely wise, that saw through the immediate to the structural, that understood the long consequence rather than just the immediate result, Metis was in that decision. He was also preparing something. Inside him, the daughter that Metis had been carrying when he swallowed her was developing, growing, becoming what she was going to become in the specific conditions of Zeus's divine body, worked on by the intelligence and the wisdom that surrounded her. She was not simply the child of Metis and Zeus. She was the child who had gestated inside the King of Gods himself, inside the most powerful being in the world, surrounded by the specific quality of his divine nature. She was being made into something extraordinary. And then the headache came. The headache that announced the birth of Athena was not ordinary pain. It was the specific pain of something that needed to come out, of something inside that had reached the point of completion and was pressing against its container. Hephaestus's axe to the skull, the crack in the bone, and then the emergence. Athena, fully formed, fully armored, shouting the war cry. The daughter equal in wisdom to her father, not equal in power, not equal in authority. In wisdom, the specific quality that Metis had possessed, that Zeus had swallowed to possess, had been passed to the daughter who gestated in the presence of it. Athena was the direct inheritance of what Metis had been, the wisdom that the mythology identified as the most important quality of the divine mind, concentrated in a goddess who had been made in the specific conditions of its fullest expression. The prophecy had been addressed, not by preventing the daughter's birth, but by managing it. The daughter, equal in wisdom to her father, had been born, but born inside the father, gestated within him, shaped by his nature as much as by her mother's. She was not a threat to Zeus. She was an extension of him. The wisdom that might have challenged his authority from outside had been incorporated into his authority from inside. And the second child, the son greater than the father, would never be born because Metis was still inside Zeus, and there was no longer the possibility of a second conception. The wheel had been prevented from turning, not by force, not by swallowing children as Kronos had done, but by the specific wisdom that Zeus had gained from swallowing wisdom itself. He had absorbed the threat rather than destroying it. When Metis is placed among the other women in Zeus's mythology of loves, something becomes clear about the structure of the whole. Io was mortal and became a goddess of Egypt. Europa was mortal and became the mother of civilization's judges. Leda was mortal and became the mother of the most beautiful woman in the world and the most devoted brothers. Danaë was mortal and became the mother of the greatest hero of the first generation. Alcmene was mortal and became the mother of the greatest hero in the mythology. Semele was mortal and became the mother of the god of ecstasy and dissolution. Each of these loves produced a child who was something the world needed, something the divine order required, something that could not have been produced any other way, because it required the combination of divine power with mortal nature in the specific quality of each specific mortal. And Metis, who was not mortal but divine, produced the goddess of wisdom, the being who embodied the quality that made it possible for divine power to be used rightly, the quality that distinguished the just king from the tyrant, the quality that Zeus himself had needed and had swallowed to have, and that lived on in the goddess born from his head. The loves of Zeus were not simply stories of desire and pursuit. They were the mythology's account of how the world was built, of how the specific qualities that existence required came into being, of how the divine and the mortal combined to produce beings who had never existed before and that the world could not have had without the specific combination that produced them. Metis was the love from which wisdom was born, the love that cost the Titaness her freedom and gave Zeus the quality that made him something other than what Kronos had been. She is inside him still, in the mythology's understanding, speaking to him, counseling him, being the wisdom that the King of Gods has access to because he once loved a Titaness who was wiser than anyone except the oldest being in creation. And her daughter, born from his head, carries her quality in the world. Every judgment Athena makes, every strategic decision she helps mortals to understand, every moment when wisdom prevails over force. That is Metis still speaking. From inside, Hera did not forgive. This is the quality that the mythology attributed to her most consistently, after her pride and her authority and the specific quality of her queenship. She did not forgive. She held what she held, and she pursued it with the patience and the thoroughness of someone who had unlimited time and unlimited motivation and a very specific list of targets. The targets were the children of Zeus's affairs with mortal women, not Zeus. This is the thing that has troubled readers of the mythology in every era since the stories were first told. Hera directed the vast majority of her divine anger not at the being who had violated the marriage she governed, not at her husband the king of gods whose infidelities were the cause of everything she suffered, but at the women and the children. at the victims of Zeus's desire rather than at its perpetrator. Why? The answer the mythology offers is partly tactical. She could not effectively punish Zeus. He was the king of gods. He was more powerful than she was in the specific sense of raw divine force. Direct confrontation between them, when it occurred, did not end well for her. When she had conspired against him with Poseidon and Athena, Thetis had summoned Briareus to sit beside Zeus as a bodyguard, and the conspiracy had ended before it began. When she had nagged and argued and made Olympus difficult, Zeus had hung her from the sky with golden chains and anvils on her feet. The direct approach did not work, but the indirect approach worked. She could not hurt Zeus. She could hurt what Zeus loved. She could not punish the infidelity. She could punish its products. And punishing the products was, in its own way, a punishment of Zeus too. Because Zeus watched. Because Zeus saw what happened to his children and felt it, however much he might be unwilling to stop it. This was the logic of Hera's campaigns against the children of Zeus's mortal loves. Not justice in any simple sense, not proportion, but the specific logic of a being operating under the constraints of a profound power differential, using what was available to her to express what she felt. The first of the children she persecuted, indirectly, was Epiphus, the son that Io had borne on the banks of the Nile after her long wandering. Hera had already dealt with Io directly. The transformation into a cow, the appointment of Argus as the hundred-eyed guard, the gadfly that drove Io across the world. She had pursued Io herself with everything she had, and then Io had been restored and had settled in Egypt and had given birth to Epiphus. Hera sent the Curetes to steal the infant. The Curetes, those divine beings who had danced and clashed their weapons around the infant Zeus on Crete to cover the sound of his crying, now employed in the service of Hera's revenge. They took Epiphus from Io and hid him. Zeus found out. He killed the Curetes who had taken his son, and Epiphus was found, in Egypt or in Syria depending on the source, and restored to his mother. The attempt failed, but the pattern was established. The children of Zeus's mortal loves were targets. Their existence was an ongoing insult to the Queen of Gods, and she would act on that insult as she found ways to act on it. Dionysus was the child she worked hardest to destroy, the child whose birth she had tried to prevent by sending Eileithyia to prevent Alcmene from delivering, the child who was born anyway, twice, from his mother's ashes and from his father's thigh. The child who was Zeus's most explicit statement that his love for mortal women produced children of divine significance. She could not prevent the birth. She turned to what came after birth. She drove Dionysus mad. Not immediately, not as an infant. Later, when he had grown into what he was, when the twice-born god of wine and ecstasy was moving through the world establishing his worship and spreading the vine. She sent madness to him, the specific divine madness that the gods could deploy against those they wished to punish, the loss of the organized mind, the dissolution of the self that distinguished Dionysus's worship from ordinary intoxication. He wandered, driven by madness across the ancient world, through Asia Minor and into Syria and down into Egypt, and eventually to Phrygia, where the great mother goddess Rhea, his own grandmother, cleansed him of the madness and taught him her rites. He was restored. He returned to sanity and to his divine purpose. But the wandering that Hera's madness had sent him on had taken him across the entire ancient world, and in that wandering he had spread his worship everywhere he went. The madness meant to destroy him had instead made him universal. He was honored in Egypt and in Syria and in Phrygia and in all the regions he had wandered through. The punishment had become the thing that made his worship more comprehensive than it would have been if he had simply remained in Greece and established his worship in the Greek world alone. This is one of the mythology's characteristic ironies. The persecution that was designed to prevent the persecuted from flourishing became the mechanism that spread their influence further than it would otherwise have reached. The most sustained, the most comprehensive, the most thoroughly documented campaign that Hera conducted against any of Zeus's children was her campaign against Heracles. She had tried to prevent his birth. She had sent the serpents to the cradle. Both of those attempts had failed. Heracles was alive and growing and becoming what his divine nature and the virtue of his mortal mother had combined to produce. So she waited. And when the time was right, when Heracles had grown into the greatest hero in the world and had married and had children and had established the life that he was trying to build, she acted. She sent madness. She sent the divine madness that the gods could deploy, the specific dissolution of the organized mind that made a person incapable of recognizing reality. Heracles, in the grip of the madness Hera sent, looked at his wife and his children and saw enemies. He saw the family he loved as the enemy he needed to destroy, and in the grip of that false seeing he killed them. All of them. He came back to himself surrounded by the bodies of the people he had loved most. This is the wound that Heracles carried through the entirety of his mythology. The 12 labors that defined him were not simply feats of strength. They were the penance for the murder of his family, the price that the oracle at Delphi set for the purification from the blood that his own hands had shed in the madness that had not been his madness, but had been experienced in his hands and through his body. Hera had not killed Heracles. She had made him kill what he loved and live with it. This was a more devastating punishment than death. Death ended. This did not end. The 12 labors were the structure that the divine order imposed to allow Heracles to eventually achieve the purification he needed, but the purification did not erase the memory. He carried the weight of what had happened in that moment of madness through every labor and every subsequent achievement of his extraordinary life. Hera continued to interfere. During the 12 labors, she sent additional obstacles, arranged for situations to be harder than they needed to be, provided assistance to those who opposed Heracles and comfort to those who tried to prevent him from succeeding. She was the constant divine opposition, the presence in the mythology of Heracles that made his triumph something he had to fight for against not just the natural difficulty of the tasks themselves, but the additional difficulty of a divine being actively working against him. She drove him to madness again later, after the labors, causing him to kill his friend Iphitus by throwing him from a wall. Another act committed in the madness she sent. Another weight added to what he carried. She arranged the circumstances of his death. The shirt of Nessus, soaked in the centaur's blood, given to Deianira by the centaur as he died, and presented to Heracles by the wife who loved him and did not know what it contained. Hera had not given the shirt to Deianira, but the chain of events that led to Heracles burning alive in the poisoned shirt traced through the specific kind of divine manipulation that the mythology attributed to Hera's ongoing campaign. What made Hera's campaign against the children of Zeus so relentless was not simply that she was cruel. She was not simply cruel. She was the goddess of marriage, the divine guardian of the sacred bond, and the sacred bond was being violated in the most comprehensive and most public way possible by the most powerful being in existence. Every child of Zeus's mortal affairs was visible evidence of the violation. Every hero born of a mortal woman and the king of gods was a monument to the fact that the institution Hera governed was not respected by the being who sat beside her on Olympus. Every time one of those children accomplished something extraordinary, every time they were celebrated and honored and given divine sanction, it was an acknowledgement that what Zeus had done when he produced them was not simply acceptable, but was actually praiseworthy. Her anger was not irrational. Her methods were often disproportionate, often cruel to beings who had done nothing to deserve what she sent them. But the source of the anger was real, and the substance of the grievance was real. The most sacred principle she embodied was being publicly and repeatedly violated, and she had no effective recourse against the violator. She did what she could do. She pursued what she could pursue. And the children who were born from the King of Gods and the mortal women he loved grew up knowing that the Queen of Gods was watching, that the achievement of their divine potential would be contested, that the greatness that their divine heritage made possible would have to be fought for against a divine opposition that was not going to simply allow them to be what they were. This is what Hera's campaigns against Zeus's children produced. Not simply suffering, though there was suffering. Not simply injustice, though there was injustice. It produced heroes who had been tested by the most demanding opposition available. Heracles, who had performed 12 impossible labors under the shadow of a crime he had committed in a madness that was not his own, and who had emerged from those labors as the greatest hero the world had known. Perseus, who had been placed in a box and thrown into the sea as an infant, and who had grown to slay Medusa and rescue Andromeda and found cities. Dionysus, who had been driven across the world by madness and had returned with his worship established in every land he had wandered through. The persecution had not destroyed them. It had made them what they were. And Hera, the queen who had pursued them, had in her pursuit contributed to the specific quality of their greatness. The hero who had never been tested was not the hero the mythology valued. The hero who had been tested by everything and had endured was. She was the test. She was part of what they became. And she sat on her throne on Olympus and she watched them. And she did not forgive. And the mythology remembered all of it. This is where we leave you for tonight. But the story isn't over. A king sealed his daughter in a bronze tower because an oracle told him the son she bore would kill him. A god came anyway in a shower of golden rain, and the child was born. And the king, terrified of a prophecy he could not escape, placed the mother and the infant in a wooden chest and threw them into the sea. Next time, Perseus, birth, growth, and Polydectes. This is a chronological series. Every episode picks up exactly where the last one left. You don't need to hold anything in your mind right now. Just rest. Your body needs this. Your mind needs this. And we'll be here every 2 days with the next chapter. Tomorrow, and we say this with certainty, the names you heard tonight will feel more familiar. That is not nothing. That is exactly what this time was for. Millions of people lie awake at night convinced they are falling behind. That every hour of sleep is an hour lost. You know something they haven't figured out yet. This time was not wasted. It never was. If tonight felt like something, if these stories found you at the right moment, subscribe and join us. Leave a comment. Hit like. We're building this community together, and your support helps us keep going. And if you'd like to know how much sleep your mind and body actually need, not a general answer, yours specifically, visit us at GeniusSleep.rest. We built a free sleep calculator there just for you. Enter your age, your lifestyle, your daily rhythm, and it will tell you exactly how much sleep your body needs. You can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. Every episode, every night, wherever you listen. Genius Sleep Academy will be here every time you close your eyes. Sleep well.